next 45 minutes to have a chat with these folks about.
Great, and I think we have a fourth panelist as well, so we may need an extra chair or else I'll use the podium. So, I think, yeah, we have a special guest kind of returning from earlier, Sebastian Schumann. So you may have heard him earlier on. So while our panelists are stepping up to the stage, grab a seat. I'll do a quick intro. So I'm an industry analyst and advisor, and I'm fairly unusual in that I used to do an awful lot on voice, video, CPaaS, WebRTC about probably 12, 13 years ago. So I'm sort of fairly familiar with all that. In fact, when Vonage was looking at strategic options about 10 years ago, another analyst and I did a presentation to their management team, and we said, basically, you should have a look at this thing called CPaaS. And there was certainly Nexmo's logo in the middle of one of our slides. So you can potentially blame us for that. So going through to where we are now, one of the things I've done recently is try to look at the overlap between the traditional CPaaS world and what I know of networks and network APIs, and network as a service as well. And I do quite a lot of work these days on wireless networks, 5G, 6G, Wi-Fi, spectrum policy, things like that. And so I've been a little bit skeptical for a long time on some of the things like QoD, and I've been quite pleased, to be honest, from what I've heard today, of some reality checks on some of the connectivity aspects of the network APIs, and we'll maybe come back to that. But just a quick one to try and wake people up. I've been walking around the venue today running speed tests on my phone, which is always a good thing to do. At an event related to 5G is just see how good the 5G actually is. So I did one test in the corridor underneath here, looking at the uplink and downlink and latency and so on. And then I've also looked at it in this auditorium, and I've also done the Wi-Fi here. We were talking earlier about the the opportunity for things like machine vision in industrial automation. You can send data over a camera to an AI for edge computing or something like that, and you might want to demand quality for that connection, for the video. So would anyone like to guess the difference in uplink speeds between the corridor below on the 5G network and here on stage on Wi-Fi? What's the difference? How many times? I'll tell you what, the Wi-Fi is faster. Would anyone like to guess how many times faster? None? Sorry? More? 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 500. It was downstairs 230 kilobits a second. And here it's about 130 megabits a second. So no API on the planet is going to sort of smooth over that. But I'll leave that and part of that. We'll maybe come back to the QoD issues later on. But for now, as I was introduced, this is about our mobile operators, particularly mobile operators rather than other telcos, turning up too late. Is everyone busy doing APIs? They're doing capabilities. They've got CPaaS. They're doing network as a service on fiber or data center interconnect. And are the mobile operators turning up saying, hey, 5G, it's all about us? I'm going to be now the lazy moderator, and I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, their view of what's... I'm going to go from the other end. So Raul, I mean, actually, Raul's in the middle. Vaibhav, if you want to introduce yourself and what you do and where you sit in relation to CPaaS, APIs, network APIs, and so on.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that. Also, I want to compliment the venue. It's amazing to just be here. My company's name is Napstract, and thanks to some of the folks on the earlier panel, the word abstract was used so many times. What we have done is when we formed this company 3 years back, we were looking at telcos, and telcos evaluating how they roll out programmable networks. What we found was the aggregation, which is the way to sell APIs, will be solved by existing businesses, which was CPaaS. They will look at cloud companies to leverage expertise besides compute and create cloud companies as go-to-market channel partners, which is going on. But telcos typically have a tendency to do a lot of system integration on their own to solve problems. And one of the areas we saw is that if we could simplify or complement their efforts to abstract network models, and these are software nodes we are talking about now, no more boxes. That was the space that Napstrack was created. It's a network exposure platform. We are abstracting information from network elements, be it 4G, 5G, or futuristic nodes. I'm going to talk a bit about Wi-Fi and fixed line because we believe telcos have three large assets, not just one, not just mobility. They have spectrum, they have real estate, which is compute, and they have fiber. So if you can effectively abstract these three assets into software-defined models and then provide a way to publish them, either on a Vonage or Ericsson or the new JV or Infobip, Nokia platforms, then the selling will take care of itself. But it's the creation of these models and making it simple and not into a large system integration project is where Napstrack was created.
So are you looking at sort of essentially a middleware layer that sits, you've got a variety of different network APIs under that, and you're essentially abstracting it and making it simpler directly for developers or through to other sort of platforms?
So as I said, there are three models the way telcos would sell. One is go to an aggregator, which is the obvious one, the CPaaS. Second is private 5G is a new challenge altogether. Not too many people talk about APIs and private 5G, but fundamentally a lot of these APIs, non-identity ones, will be taken up by private 5G. Third one being is local content companies, local streaming companies, local OTT companies, they may directly go with telco because of very specific needs on QoS, traffic influence, we'll talk a bit about that. So our view is that irrespective of the go-to-market model, and irrespective of kind of network elements that they possess, is there a way to create, translate abstraction models which can position? So we call this platform NIOP, it's called Napstrack IO Operator Platform, and we were thrilled actually in 23 to see GSMA launch Operator Platform as a theme in MWC. So we have two products, Dean. One is NEF, which is part of the 5G core, and then we have the abstraction layer on the top.
Great, thanks. Raul, I'm going to come back to you later because you've already sort of presented. I'm going to jump straight to Eran because obviously you're the other newcomer on the stage. Sebastian, you were here earlier as well. Eran, if you want to give a couple of minutes on what you're doing, where you, frankly, your take on today as well, and sort of what your perceptions are versus maybe what they were when you walked in this morning.
Sure, perfect. Hi, everybody. So I hope you still have energy at this time of day. We are at Glide, we are kind of new in this ecosystem, and we came to help modernizing kind of this CPaaS ecosystem, looking at the open gateway APIs as a very interesting opportunity to disrupt this market and make it more developer friendly and to get all this like onboarding experience for telcos to become much easier. And listening to all these sessions today, what I captured is the kind of sound bites. They all say the same. If we look at the current CPaaS market, when talking about messaging as the main thing that is happening, and inside messaging, it ended up to be one-time password taking a majority of that flow, right? And where we were looking at the S&P analysis, like the two biggest on the right slides, they were in the interesting billions of total addressable market, where number verify, which comes to do this, and one-time password. So as we are looking at, and you mentioned some of very important assets of telcos, right? The network, the fiber, all of that stuff. There is one big asset of telcos, which is the identity, right? And this is mainly what is being monetized by CPaaS today. And as Ericsson mentioned earlier, this is or maybe the second, like 30% of the market potential, but this is the one that exists today. And as I was listening to the sessions, it came back and back again that this is like the biggest existing opportunity, right? Now, talking about the party, I'll try to take this analogy better. So there is a big, one-time password party, right?
Yeah.
It's happening, everybody's having fun, drinking, there's great music, people are happy about that. But slowly, there's other parties that are starting, like underground parties that are becoming more and more interesting. And we have the passkey party that started like this year to really come and become very, very interesting. And this is an amazing experience, right? And we got the one-time password on WhatsApp. We had the authenticator parties that are, not that fun, but they're still happening.
So all the cool kids are going off to passkeys and WhatsApp. And
Exactly,
things, yeah.
exactly. And we stay with this old music and still looks really good. Like people are buying bottles, there's still bottle service, things are still happening. But what we can see is the trend is going to the different parties. And we'll talk about it more, but I think the problem is not coming late to the party, but still thinking that the party is happening and the place where this is declining. And what we believe in Glide is that we want to provide users with a better experience. We want them to glide in the internet, to have this kind of single sign-on experience, super secure, something that we didn't speak a lot about, like there was an excellent question around the AI, and we think that AI presents a huge opportunity, right, with AI agents and how they will become part of this kind of communication around channel, around RCS, around voice, how they have identity, but also as a threat, right, to steal identity. So we can talk more about that.
We'll come back to that. Raul, I just want to sort of pick up on some of your presentation, and it was very interesting always to do. I've analyzed as well. So doing addressable market is always fun because you can then blame other people if they don't do what they need to make your forecast come true. There's two things jumped out. One is, have you got any thoughts about the B2B versus B2B2C segmentation? I mean, most of it on the identity, it seems to be mostly B2B2C. I'll come back to the other one. But what was...
Yeah, so the analysis that we did is actually similar to what Ericsson presented. We did a separate for B2B and B2B2C use cases, where the sheer volume of the consumer segment just really kind of overshadows the B2B. But it's a different business model, it's a different pricing scheme. We also considered in the analysis that for B2B, operators could commercialize directly, whereas for B2B2C, it makes more sense to do it through an aggregator. That's how we build the model. However, I do think that the aggregator model makes much more sense for telcos. Like I said, the building a developer ecosystem, CPaaS vendors have been doing that for years, and they already have a significant traction there. So if the work is already done, you can benefit. So I think I'm more in favor of the aggregator model, with the caveat of that revenue share split.
Yeah. I suppose, and the other question, just stimulated by what Eran has just said, is, are there pricing pressures coming from all of the other ways of doing the capabilities you've identified? So things like the identity, authentication. So our passkeys, essentially, has that sort of changed the average price per transaction you're building in, or is there a risk of that sort of thing?
Well, there's definitely a risk, and one thing that we believe hyperscalers, as they become part of the equation, that's just going to happen. There's going to be a lot of pressure on prices. However, I just thinking about the very first presentation from the day, the keynote, where you have
Not sure.
That was not me. So yeah, you're just thinking about how CPaaS is evolving and looking at what was defined as CPaaS 3.0. That could be a much different game, where it's higher margins as opposed to the commodified services of CPaaS 1.0. So you still need those services, but there are very interesting use cases moving out the chain.
Thank you, thank you. Sebastian, if you remind people, if you maybe weren't here this morning, or I'm not sure if it's streamed online, your background and what you're doing, and I'll come back with a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'm with Deutsche Telekom, building from the technology side platform for the international wholesale unit. So we are, in a way, an aggregator for SMS. We run a lot of voice traffic, billions of minutes from a wholesale perspective, and we're building now a portal for a new set of portfolios. CPaaS is part of it, and workflow automation tool, and we also have network APIs and other APIs in there, and we look as well into RBM. Yeah, and actually when I read the headline, are we late to the party? I remember that in 2012 I was already developing on the Jipe SDK, something what you would call now RBM. Yeah, so they had libraries out there where you could develop, and we launched RBM, RCS back then in Slovakia as the first Jipe customer. And funny enough, it's same with CPaaS. Yeah, working on CPaaS for a telco for such a long time, in between a startup.
DT's had like four or five CPaaS.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to like.
But currently we do 3 approaches in parallel. Yeah, we heard about a JV. There's another initiative, and then there's what we are trying to do from a wholesale perspective. And the question is, are we late, or is it now the time? Because you could always ask, what if we would have done it earlier? Would we have disrupted ourselves, or would we have,
I think going back to like 2012 or 2013, you did a thing with Troppo, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Troppo, exactly. And then we had a developer portal. We relaunched one 2 years ago, and then we canceled it last year again. So we're trying, and.
So one question I have, and this is to everyone, is I have a sort of pet hypothesis that the early customers for a lot of the telecom or network APIs are either inside the operator, so between different business units, or between different classes of service providers. So it could be the wholesale or the network part of the telco and the retail services team, the B2B and SI team, the broadcast services, the people running the public safety network, the people doing government contracts, getting internal APIs for quality and possibly identity as well. The next class, I think, are going to be between service providers. If I roam and I'm paying a premium for it, why doesn't my home operator request higher quality of service given I'm paying so much money? So does that work? Before we get to enterprise, is it the sort of eating your own dog food? So Sebastian, you were talking this morning about some of the internal use of APIs.
Yeah, I think certainly it's an interesting question. I mean, we have as DT has an IoT unit. Yeah, that would be one of the obvious consumers you could think of. And indeed, I think it makes sense. The question is whether these internal units have an easy way actually of consuming these APIs. So from my perspective, practically speaking, if I have the chance to consume an internal service versus an external service, I might have it easier to buy off a hyperscaler than from a different unit, practically speaking now. But of course, from a use case perspective, you're right, because from an enterprise perspective, I think there is still a lot of education to be done. So Kamara came more or less from industry of telcos, hyperscalers, and other larger organizations, and of course they are going to resell this among themselves. I think hyperscalers certainly will play an important role, and also from a commercial perspective, once you go into enterprises, you need also the commercial ecosystem I addressed this morning. An enterprise needs to buy off these 4 or 5 telcos relevant for them, not just individually, but with some form of aggregation, whether that's a telco themselves that aggregates, like we are planning to do, or whether that's through a JV or through an aggregator. But I think certainly this needs to be solved, and it's not yet fully solved. Yeah.
Anyone else have thoughts on the sort of internal use?
So I'll just give an example. The question was operator to its own, let's say, wholesale unit, and that's an established model, which is already in works. But then operator to operator, and if you look at, let's say, network API, and I, for a minute, ignore the identity bit, because that's information API, it's more, am I this, yes or no? But control APIs is about, if I'm so-and-so, do the following, right? So in that case, we had an interesting project where 2 providers were involved, and there was an area of interest kind of geo-fenced, and based on the type of subscriber, in this case with the type of device, walking in, walking out, could potentially do a bit of revenue sharing, right? In this case, the home provider was X and the visitor was Y. Again, this was a conceptual project. It's not something which has got published and moved ahead. But we found this as an example where network APIs, when they are coupled with few other interesting information, identity is one of that. Second is type of device is another one. And then where you're consuming that API is a third one. If you can orchestrate this between two providers through federated model, through an aggregator, I think then there is potential revenue to be established. The second scenario, just to finish, is typically MNOs have B2C business, and then they have enterprise business, which is enabling private 5G. There, obviously, visited versus home network is a very different concept, but those are more for automation rather than revenue generation.
I mean, the private network is an interesting one. I'll come back to that, because quite often I find operators have a completely separate core network and completely different vendor stack for their enterprise engagements. Also, Raul, did you see anything, or the musical microphones here, but yeah. Did you see anything in your work about the sort of internal sales, or sort of where you're looking at consumption of any of these capabilities that were internal between units within an operator, or are you looking just at the external market?
We just look at external. I did notice some comments, though, and I don't know if this is related to what you're asking, but the internal politics with some telcos are tremendous, and we see that as one big factor, kind of.
Because the reason I'm asking this is the way that AWS grew and the Amazon APIs was Jeff Bezos insisting that all the different bits of Amazon communicated via API, which grew scale and then allowed them to offer those same things externally as well, which then grew more scale. I'm not seeing that at the moment for telecom APIs.
Okay, I honestly, I haven't looked closely at that, but in the briefings that I've had with telcos, and that's, I've talked to Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom, I always ask that, and Telefonica specifically has a very interesting story in terms of how they develop their own digital transformation strategy. So they started with themselves, and then that helped them develop the services that they offer to their clients. So I could point that out. I think you're absolutely right. You have to practice what you preach.
So Sebastian, you said that sometimes it's easier for them to go and buy it from a hyperscaler, right? And I think this is the answer. So telco politics are so complex, and having the internal business units work with each other and making the contracts is very hard. We took the approach of working with cloud providers as the way to consume this API. So we partner with Google, and we offer the open gateway aggregation now in Google Cloud Platform. And we think that it's easier for everybody, basically, to take the existing cloud account and to have a developer in 10 minutes just enable it and work. And I think this is what we're going to see, as we see that already happening. Biggs spoke about this, that using AWS to expose other stuff. So cloud, I think, is the best way for everybody to communicate.
Right, so it's basically like having the public cloud. It's the same way that people used to have intranets run on the public cloud. Right, okay, it's like your internal marketplace. So going back to sort of some of the premise of the discussion here is it identity which is the key to linking traditional CPaaS with network APIs? I mean, there's almost like a sort of set of, you can call them sort of CPaaS adjacent capabilities. So sort of the identity, maybe fraud detection, SIM swap, location, which you can see those being part of a customer journey in a mobile app or something like that. So I classify those as sort of CPaaS adjacent. And then there's other stuff like quality on demand, sort of network information. Is the network congested on a Wednesday afternoon in the middle of Amsterdam or whatever it is? Or maybe regulatory APIs, which are sort of further away from CPaaS. Is that reasonable? Is that how you see the world as well? Or do you see CPaaS expanding to embrace all of this?
Yeah, the way I look at it is, so CPaaS emerged as that enabler with communication services. And then that just took off, and we have very successful CPaaS companies. The issue right now, I think it's a huge opportunity because all of those services, and some of them very successful, over the top, they could be done if you had access to the network capabilities, and I think probably execute or do a much better job. I was talking to Jonathan earlier today, and he was asking me about RCS, and from my perspective, and of course we've heard about RCS for several years now.
17 by my count, and I've been negative for 16 and a half of them.
Wow, okay. So from my perspective, if something like RCS had been launched, you couldn't have a need for WhatsApp. But you know, the story, we all know, WhatsApp is very successful. Now they're going strong with payments and commerce. So that is a threat for operators. But in terms of operators complementing the communication layer and then the network layer, I think it has so much potential that, come on guys.
Yeah, I'll try to be a bit more radical. I think that, as you just mentioned, if we don't want to have another WhatsApp happening on RCS, there is an urgency to work on the identity side of things. I think that network APIs on the quality on demand are very interesting, but very long-term, and as you measured 5G.
I'm not going to have another WhatsApp occurring on RCS. Sort of RCS never happened. Sort of WhatsApp evolved organically because people used it.
Yeah.
So explain, what do you mean?
So if you look at passkeys, if you look at one-time password in WhatsApp that are now evolving, what we're going to see is if the telco community is not implementing very fast a solution that is net better, all this fund revenue that is happening now is just to go into these other platforms providing amazing authentication and secure authentication solutions. So we believe that there is a very limited time window now that operators should really run and go and implement that to be able to preserve the authentication revenues and to be able to build on top of that.
What happens? I mean, this is open to everyone. But what happens with there's a lot of, I don't know, they're not even corner cases. They're quite important ones. So MVNOs in some markets are 20% of subscribers. It's not obvious to me how they fit into this landscape. A lot of parts of the world, you have multi-SIM phones. You have multi-IMSI SIM cards. I did think I was away the other week and I put a travel SIM into my iPhone first time. Can the identity APIs deal with all of those?
I'll try to do it fast. One, regarding the eSIMs and all that stuff, the solution we think should be through the telco finder. We've implemented the telco finder. We work with the GSMA to make it a general one. And if you can bind an eSIM with your own session by consent, you can basically have telco have this done on all of your eSIMs. So that's one aspect of it. In general, this identity feature is the key feature to get developers onboarded into this new ecosystem. And we believe it's possible if it will be done fast.
Okay. All right. We'll maybe come back to some of the finer grain ones and things like MVNOs another time. I'm going to jump a little bit. We've had private networks mentioned a few times today. Where does that fit into what we've been hearing? Is it, and actually there are some identity things there where you need to onboard, whether it's IoT products, which are what the CIO actually thinks they are. If you've got a video camera, for example, or a drone, it needs to be the right drone. But also there's a bunch of things, either APIs inside private networks or APIs to create private networks.
Yeah, So I think the most interesting part about private networks is it's not just the smartphone involved anymore, right? The device which is consuming APIs, or eventually the service, is a drone or a moving car or a automated crane. And that's where APIs really come into play. Identity is admission control, and that allows you to know that, hey, this particular device belongs to this network. It's allowed to do the following. But what we have found is video surveillance, and also the fact that public networks are driven by regulations, and regulations do not allow disclosure of location as easy as you would like. An API does it easily, but a government may not allow that as easily as you would like. So that gives a lot of freedom or a lot of possibilities in private 5G networks or private networks to find out location of device and then implement these APIs. So I think the consumption around APIs will be large. The monetization potential is unknown because it's more about automation. It's not still about new revenue getting generated. But for telcos, it's essential to invest because it gives them a fundamental way to differentiate with either peer telcos in the same country or with a IT solution provider. And I think I was talking to AWS, and one of the things they told us, and we learned from them, is it's not selling the API that matters, really.
Yeah.
It's the solution around the API, which is where telcos need to sell. So I think from that point, private 5G has an interesting proposition. But it's API plus the solution, which is going to get them there.
I would tend to agree. Actually, by the way, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to put your hand up. If you don't catch my eye, I'm sure someone will point you out from the floor. So, sorry, coming back to that, Sebastian. So you're focused more on the sort of, say, the internal process and the onboarding for. Who are the people you're looking to onboard? Is it enterprises? Is it consumers? What's the?
No, actually not. So we are our platform. So we are the wholesale unit. So we talk to other carriers, and we essentially. So we are talking to some very large enterprises, and we also have already a large enterprise customer on it. But that's the exception. Usually we would sell to other telcos, like we sell now to them, and we have a platform that enables them to go into their enterprise market. So it's essentially a white label platform that they can. Easily brand. So think of really setting a small configuration parameter. They can use their own connectivity they got from us with their rates and everything. So essentially it's a portal these telcos can use in their market to address the CPaaS needs of these enterprises. And we are the enabler for them. We're not planning to sell directly, but to other telcos actually.
So I'm going to try and knit everything together here. So here's a scenario. Imagine you're an enterprise that wants to run drones. You could be a construction company or an oil company with a refinery, and you want to do visual inspections with a drone over a very large area. It could be an oil field, kilometers in size. You will need to have really reliable wireless connection to the drone, both for control and for video coming back to it. But then also, as well as the pilot, you might have a remote expert who's looking at, is there corrosion on this pipe? Is that thing safe? Whatever. So you've got this sort of multi-part scenario. In that case, you've got the video stream, you've got the control stream, you've got the wide area connection to someone else. Who takes the lead on that? Is it the video application developer? Is it a service provider, an integrator? And how do they tie together everything that we've heard today and that all of you are doing? Yeah, go for it.
There is no right and wrong answer, but I'll talk from experience. If you have to look at a solution of this type, we're looking at next generation technology to enable your customers. Typically, we are finding that enterprises is going to a cloud provider. It's an hyperscaler. That's the first stop of check. And the hyperscaler then in turn has partnerships. You mentioned about Google, that's a very interesting one. And these hyperscalers are pretty strong now to work with telcos, with specialists, create a solution to solve this problem. And one of the projects we worked in, it was led by AWS. The applications were from Intel. The network was from a large European telco. We were the API enabler. And then you had 3 or 4 different private 5G core vendors. So to put this together, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's becoming clear that if identity was for CPaaS, solutions is going towards cloud, and then the cloud figures out how to make sure that everything happens through a SaaS model, so the enterprise cost of ownership remains the same as it is today. If telcos can create amazing network as a service platform, they can take lead over here as well. Initial signs are still pointing towards a hyperscaler.
I would say it's going to be a bit fragmented in the beginning. I don't necessarily think if somebody runs a drone with a video included, they would come to us for the video solution. I think they would already have one. So they might come to us for improving it for certain scenarios. I think if they would have problems with connectivity, that would be their starting point, right? Where you have either on a project base, or they start looking at who could help in the area with connectivity. That's something you can actually do. I personally don't believe that we would offer, I don't know, QoS video as a bundle, because you see many companies that do video, they rather adapt the video for things like Wi-Fi and bad conditions rather than trying to solve it with the QoS thing. I don't think that's going to work, but I certainly think it's going to be patched together in a project, but it won't start from a CPaaS perspective. I don't think it will start with our CPaaS, because most likely somebody has a solution that's maybe working or not. I think for these companies, most likely connectivity is the thing they would come for telco first.
And Eran, in that scenario, you really, really want to be sure that both the pilot and the remote viewer are who they say they are. But is that just like a few cents, or is there going to be like gold-plated authentication for that?
In general, I think, and there was talking about this, things are going into verticalized solutions. So I think the solution provider for that would be a vertical company that will give the solution. They will work probably with cloud providers to get the access for the API when they integrate, because they don't want to work with individual telcos, and this is going to be the majority of these solutions.
Thanks. And Raul, in that sort of scenario, what are the bits that are, in your view, that fits into your addressable space?
Well, what I wanted to say, just following up on your thoughts, for those use cases like you described that are highly complex and innovative, I agree with you. We see the role of system integrators as just critical. And we do evaluations in terms of those type of deployments in general for different IoT, AI use cases. The likelihood of such projects failing just increases significantly unless you have a systems integrator, and same goes for the ROI. So I do think we're looking at a more complex ecosystem. I could maybe go with a system integrator to take the lead, or sometimes some telcos have developed a very solid consulting team for solutions.
Okay, so I deliberately chose that because it was quite complex, but at the same time, it feels real in a way of the sort of thing that an enterprise might want. So at the other end of the spectrum, there's presumably the things where there's millions or billions of transactions, and from a telecom operator point of view, that's good because there's average price times something with lots of zeros. I mean, is that? Do you think that this inevitably pushes the opportunity we're all discussing here more to the B2B2C side of things rather than B2B?
I strongly believe it is. I think this is the big opportunity, and this is where the assets of telcos around identity, around the mobile connectivity is most significant.
Yes, in terms of volume, just that alone makes it very, very compelling for B2B to C. It will be a different business model, so and pricing. So the enterprise use cases are going to be different. I was thinking though in terms of how CPaaS grew, the pioneers of CPaaS, how they emerged hand in hand with the Ubers, WhatsApp, and so on of the world. I think if something like that happened with the network APIs, we could really see an explosion there.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've got 50 seconds. I think that's probably sufficient for a round of applause, and then allow people to leave the stage. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent panel, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean, for